So, if I also look at much of what else the anime community here on YouTube has to say about Rumbling Hearts, I find myself, just wanting to boom and blow my brains out from all of it, to be honest with you. I look at them and I'm, they're not worth killing myself over, but, you look at what people have to say and you just want to bash your head into the desk over and over and over again. See, I'm not one of you. I guess you could say that I am an outsider looking in on a community and starting to realize, why it is I don't fit in among anime fans. And I'm realizing that other people have talked about this, but the way that so many of our shows feature very hyper masculine characters and dial up femininity and masculinity to 11, basically. So you end up with these romance series and you end up with these male characters, and these male characters are, you know, Joe every dude. And so, I think that one of the things that anime writers do is kind of make these guys that are, Joe everyman characters. And one of the things that they do is they will actually make, in these romance series, these guys, well, one of the conventions of any romance show is to make them dude very dense about women's feelings, extremely, and unaware of, just having trouble figuring out what the appropriate response is to their behavior, and their communication style happens to be, especially when it's especially indirect and they don't say precisely what they really want and mean. The guesswork that happens in that kind of situation, and you see the hijinks that break out even in Kimi Nozo, and that, he's trying to figure out Haruka's feelings even very early on in it and doesn't know how to respond. Then, Hayase is basically, and Shinji follow them around. And I think that's part of where Shinji basically fell in love with, Hayase. But they follow him around and, they berate him for the way that he doesn't know the appropriate way to respond. Then Tateyuki gets infuriated because I think that, the subtext there is just, Tateyuki really gets mad at them but doesn't know how to explain, like, I'm an idiot, I'm sorry, I didn't know what I was supposed to do in this situation. I had a thoughtless reaction because I just didn't understand what I was supposed to do. I'm not that, I'm very new to this dating experience too, so I don't know how I'm supposed to react, kind of thing, on his behalf, on his behalf. And you see that happen. I mean, this is one of the first loves that any of the characters have had on the show. It's likely Haruka's very first crush. She doesn't, neither of the two of them really fully understand each other early on. They only know what they can possibly know about their partners. The lack of depth of understanding of each other's characters definitely, despite their friendship and intimate relationship, definitely does cause some early, trouble in the relationship. I mean, you go through that whole experience, and I find myself looking back on this. I've been a fan of the show since like 2003. Unlike the rest of you, I was using very obscure technical knowledge to get it directly from the fan subs almost as soon as it was coming out, and I've been a fan since basically 2003. So, go back, rewind the clock 20 fucking years, and when it first happened, I've been watching my anime list for that long, and when it was first out, it was like near the top of my anime list, and then of course, we get our hands on Rumbling Hearts in the United States, and what naturally happens is people that aren't already inclined towards romance animes in the first place will basically get their hands on it and then have a very intense reaction to it, and then basically want to throw it in the trash bin. And if I had to speculate what their rationales are, it's dislike of Mitsuki as a character, which I'm not just comfortable with, to be honest. I mean, I do think she does a lot of things that are kind of selfish. um and they push that ship so strongly on you, but at least there's an OAV where you can basically flip the narrative upside down and go the as you would know if you know how to refer to these things, but you can go the Haruka route if you want, by just watching the OVA of the damn thing, and they'll show you how it goes down, and it's actually quite satisfying how they paint that one in particular. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but I enjoyed it. Because I preferred him with Haruka, to be honest. I think that part of it is just kind of like Mitsuki kind of comes across as career woman, whereas despite the fact that Haruka was also the same way, like Haruka's, I don't know, there's just something that's more, I guess you could say, like alluring and feminine about her, and Mitsuki kind of gets her way through the world by becoming more masculine, whereas Haruka wants to become a children's novelist, and that's, I think, part of what makes the whole thing so much more painful. I mean, she writes that whole book, that story about Mayu's gift that she gives Tateyuki at the end. I mean, it's just such like just absolutely, it's, I don't know, like it's like she's trying to be gentle, but the way she goes about it just ends up giving it an impact that hits so much harder than it would have to just say, I think that this is just too much for me. Everything hurts too much. I can't do this. You know, instead of just saying she felt overwhelmed and couldn't do it anymore, it just ends up hurting worse. I mean, she's trying to be considerate to his feelings, but it's like just that is, in doing so, makes it just shatter so much harder. That scene like hits with just an absolutely devastating amount of emotional impact and weight, and it just hits so hard. It's like a ton of bricks. I literally, to this day, like, I went out and bought the also another piece of merch I have from this is the damn book itself. It's in Japanese. I can't quite read the whole thing, but I got a physical representation of it off of eBay. It was out there. I bought it as well to signify my fanaticism for this particular anime, and I got my hands on that and imported it into the country, and I was very happy to do so. And I've loved this one all the way since 2003, and so it's almost like the moment North America got the chance to react to it. It reacted very poorly, and I've had time to stew, over my emotional reactions to it. I think basically where I was going with that is that this movie, this not movie but series, over its lifespan becomes something that kind of confronts people's morality and their affection for monogamy. And since there is technically a case of infidelity that shows up in the anime, it's like they go for that default very tempting sort of perspective where it's like Tateyuki was supposed to just wait it out through the coma for the character, and it's like I don't know any woman that would do that for a guy, to be honest with you. It's like you don't wait around forever for romance. It's just not like, I don't know about that. And if your girlfriend was in a coma and everything, I mean, it's a little bit complicated. Are you going to wait around for her to potentially wake up and knowing that she might never? you know I don't know. I mean, how long are you supposed to wait in a situation where it's unclear that they will ever wake up? I mean, really. And that anime though ended up being in particular one of my favorite, and I think that part of it was just that there was not really a dearth of content to compare it to back then. It wasn't like we had a bunch of anime romances, and in particular we didn't really have a lot of shows that were as dark and like that were both a romance and yet entered into a space that was as dark as Kimi no Zu actually enters. Like there's an intensity to the story, and people they criticize like it calling itself hyper realistic, they hyper realism and everything, and I have a bit of an agreement with you in that I think that the characters are put through an extreme set of circumstances that most people don't ever actually go through. And so it's not quite a realistic story, but hypothetically speaking, if we were pushed through that extreme set of circumstances, it's a little bit, you know, in your head, you're beginning to wonder, like, if we went through these extreme circumstances, would we react the same way these characters did? is one of the thoughts that goes through your head. I mean, if you end up with that love triangle type situation in your life, and the person that you were supposed to be with ends up getting hit by a car, very few people go through that. Like, that's an extreme set of circumstances. It's rare. And I'm trying to say that it's not really all that realistic, and them trying to paint it that way is incorrect. But still, first of all, realism is overrated. Second, secondly, in a big way, it's like, we come to these kind of things. We come to these animes, and usually in a big way, to escape from reality. We're not looking for something that's realistic. We're looking for something that isn't. You know what I mean? Like, we're not looking for that, because reality can be at times way too mundane. And one thing that anime does is it allows us to explore, a more extreme set of circumstances, and Rumbling Hearts definitely does push you through that. I think that North America had a very bad reaction, though, because it's just like, it's always had these kind of, this, number one, this extreme affection for monogamy, and it just, it pushes into this space where it's like, I guess you're supposed to wait like 3+ years for your girlfriend to wake up, and if you didn't, you're a fucking inhuman monster. Like, everything is put on, pause anyways. I mean, even if Tatsuyuki had wanted to break up with her, he can't now that she's in a fucking coma. Like, he can't do things proper in that situation. The person is just, completely incapacitated and unable, to respond. And what are you supposed to do in that set of circumstances? Is my big, throwing my hands up in the air at the North Americans' reaction to it, where they're just like, Tatsuyuki is a monster. He's a bad person because he slept with Hayase. And it's just like, if you had played the freaking Euro you would probably be having an even more extreme reaction to him, because in the Euro, because of the fact that they're targeted at men in particular, like, and Ajay was basically originally did that. You will find that the character Tateyuki basically, for the pleasure of the viewers, is, sleeps with pretty much every female member of the cast, and that, includes all the nurses, and like, just because that's what they do in HCG games and everything. That's what an Eurogame does and puts you through. And you know, it's just a reality for the naive to the whole thing. And I've been aware of this. I mean, of course, I, through my own experiences and research of this particular anime and my obsessive love of it. I mean, I don't, like, personally, like, my affection for this isn't that I like sex. It's just that it was a very touching story, and the fact that it made my heart have feels. I mean, this series really hurt, but it kind of became like a pain that you kind of slowly grew addicted to. You like the way that it hurts, and that's what's so big about KGNE. Like, it hits you in that space. It becomes almost this pain that you want to feel. And what people don't understand in, like, the modern day about Kimi no Zoo is that today we're in a period of content saturation. Back in 2003, there wasn't a lot to basically, compete with Kimi no Zoo. So all of you that hate it in the modern era in the anime community are coming at it from a perspective of having, a million shows to compare it to. Whereas back then, if you were around back then in 2003, yeah, there was a bunch of anime, right? But there still wasn't the same dearth of content there is now. And so, like, it managed to distinguish itself from other shows. I mean, like, say for instance, Seikano. Kimi no Zoo enters a very dark space, and it's sad, but it's not like suicidal level sadness the way that Seikano ends up being. It's a very intense sadness in that one, where it's like the world universe is like thousands of times more bleak in Seikano. And that's one of the alternatives that was available back then to it as a romance. But there wasn't a lot that went through a very exquisite, dark period and patch, and that conveyed romantic relationships this way. And if I were to say how I feel is that the anime community has gotten the benefit, unfortunately, of the doubt of a lot of hyper masculine characters, very strong men in different genres, and very strong and pronounced characters that would never find themselves in these kind of situations where they're having such an intense reaction to emotionally to the women in their world, and would not be that sensitive and touchy the way that Tateyuki ends up being, and they end up calling him a coward because they've got all these other anime characters to compare him to. And it's like, one of the things that I dislike the most about anime fans is that they're kind of addicted to this very hyper masculine expression, and any male character that isn't that way just gets hated on immensely because he's not Cloud Strife, or some of these guys that just are not shaken or bothered by much of anything until like very deep in the series. They want somebody that's very manly, and anything that isn't, they're going to hate on. And so it's like we've had to deal with this extreme hatred for all of these kind of protagonists in these series. Like in Rent a Girlfriend, they can't stand the main guy at all. They can't, they fucking hate him. And it's like, like I don't know, it's like he's normal, he's maybe denser than an average male when it comes to dealing with women's affections, but you wouldn't have a fucking story if he wasn't. That's the convention. That's fucking formula when it comes to romance. And like, people hate the formula or something, or they want something different than it. But it's like, if you actually got different, you would realize and compare it to what you got and hate it even more than you hated the formula. You don't fucking know what you want. You think you want something different, but you don't really.